What if a single hug could change someone's entire life? It was the last day of school in a quiet working-class town, where the sun baked the cracked asphalt and cicadas hummed like a soft, restless heartbeat. The yellow school bus groaned to a stop in front of a small brick house at the end of Maple Drive. Inside, 12-year-old Jamie struggled to gather his backpack with his trembling hands. His legs, thin and uneven, refused to cooperate the way he wanted. The other kids had already bounded off, their laughter fading into the warm air. "Take your time, buddy," the driver said, watching in the rearview mirror. His name was Tom Harris, 58, wiry, with a kind of rugged tiredness about him. The kind that comes from years of early mornings and long routes. Jamie smiled shyly. "Thanks, Mr. Harris." The boy's braces clinked against the metal steps as he made his slow descent. Every move seemed like a battle, but Tom never rushed him. He always waited, rain or shine, until Jamie's feet safely touched the ground. Today was no different. But when Jamie turned to wave goodbye, something in his eyes lingered, a quiet, knowing sadness. "See you next year, champ," Tom said. Jamie hesitated. Then before Tom could react, the boy hobbled forward and wrapped his arms around him. A hug, fragile, unexpected, and trembling with something unspoken. Tom froze, caught between surprise and emotion. "Thank you," Jamie whispered. His voice cracked as he added, "for not treating me different." Tom swallowed hard. "Hey, you're just one of my kids," he said, trying to sound casual. But his voice betrayed him. Jamie let go, smiled faintly, and limped away toward the small figure waiting at the door. His mother. Tom sat there for a moment, hand resting on the steering wheel. Before he finally put the bus in gear, he didn't know it yet, but that hug would echo far beyond that summer afternoon. The next morning, Tom's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., as it had for the past 20 years. He brewed his coffee, fed his old beagle, and opened the newspaper. That's when he saw it. A headline about a fatal car crash just outside of town, a small silver sedan crushed beyond recognition. The driver was identified as a woman in her 30s. Her name, Sarah Mitchell. Tom froze. Jamie's mom. The coffee slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. He read the name again, unable to breathe. Beneath it, a single sentence. "She is survived by her 12-year-old son." The world seemed to collapse in silence. He didn't drive that day. Couldn't. The bus sat parked in the lot while he sat on his porch, staring at nothing. He had seen enough loss over the years, but this was different. That afternoon, the school called. They were looking for Jamie. Apparently, no one had been able to reach the boy's father, a man rumored to be overseas, too busy, too rich, too absent. Tom didn't know much about him. No one really did. By evening, a dark SUV pulled up in front of Sarah's house. A tall man stepped out, expensive suit, clean cut but hollow-eyed. He moved like someone who had everything yet felt nothing. Richard Mitchell, CEO of a tech empire worth billions. He hadn't been home in 2 years. Not since he and Sarah split. Not since Jamie's diagnosis, which he had quietly funded but emotionally avoided. Now he was here, standing in the ruins of his past. Inside, the house smelled faintly of vanilla and medication. Toys lay scattered on the floor. On the kitchen table, a note in Sarah's handwriting read, "Jamie's meds in the blue box. Tell him I love him." He found Jamie sitting silently in his wheelchair, holding a toy school bus. "Hi, Dad," the boy said softly. Richard froze. He didn't know whether to hug him or apologize. "Hey, buddy," he managed. "I came as soon as I heard." Jamie nodded but didn't look up. His voice was small. "Mr. Harris said goodbye yesterday." Richard frowned. "Who's that?" "My bus driver." Something about the way Jamie said it, tender, full of respect, made Richard uneasy. Later that night, when Jamie had fallen asleep, Richard wandered through the small home, absorbing the life he had missed. Photographs lined the hallway. Birthdays, messy smiles, a tired mother holding her son after therapy sessions. In one frame, Jamie sat on the front steps, waving at the bus with a grin so bright it hurt to look at. Richard stared at it for a long time. The next morning, he drove to the bus depot. Tom was there, cleaning the mirrors on his vehicle. The man looked worn, grief hiding behind the lines in his face. "Mr. Harris?" Richard asked. Tom turned cautious. "Yes, sir. I'm Richard Mitchell, Jamie's father." Tom's expression softened instantly. "I'm so sorry, sir." Your wife, she was a good woman. Richard nodded. He looked around at the old buses lined like tired soldiers. Jamie talks about you, he said quietly. Tom smiled faintly. He's a brave kid. Smart, too. Tougher than he looks. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Richard said, "You were the last person to see him smile before—" His voice cracked slightly. "Before everything happened." Tom lowered his eyes. "He gave me a hug. Caught me off guard." Richard looked at him sharply. "A hug?" "Yeah," Tom said, chuckling sadly. "Said thanks for not treating him different. That kid's got more heart than anyone I've ever met." Richard swallowed hard. That night, back at the mansion he barely recognized as home, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that hug, a moment of gratitude his son had given to a stranger. Not to him. He walked through the dark halls past the paintings and glass until he stopped at the massive window overlooking the city. Lights twinkled like distant stars, soulless and cold. Money couldn't fix what he'd broken. But maybe he could do something that mattered. The next morning he made a call, then another, and another. By the end of the week, the sound of heavy engines echoed down Maple Drive. A crowd gathered as a truck pulled up, towing something enormous beneath a silver tarp. Jamie sat in his wheelchair beside Tom, eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" he asked. Tom shrugged, though he looked just as curious. Then Richard stepped forward. He was dressed simply this time, no suit, no tie. He smiled at his son, though his eyes glistened with something deeper. "This is for you," he said quietly. He pulled the tarp away. Beneath it gleamed a brand new school bus, polished, custom-built, and painted a soft golden yellow that shimmered in the sunlight. But this wasn't just any bus. The door lowered into a ramp, wide enough for Jamie's wheelchair. The seats were designed for accessibility, comfort, and independence. Jamie's mouth fell open. "It's mine?" Richard nodded. "It's ours," he said. "The first of many. We're starting something new. Buses for kids who need a little extra help getting to school." Tom stared in disbelief. "You're serious?" Richard turned to him. "I want you to run it. You've been driving for 20 years, Mr. Harris. You know what these kids need. I'll fund everything. You just make it happen." For a moment, the man who had spent his life behind a wheel couldn't speak. Jamie looked at the gleaming bus again, then at his father. "Can we name it?" he asked. Richard smiled. "Of course," Jamie thought for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Mom's Ride." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the wind seemed to pause. Richard's eyes welled up and Tom nodded quietly. "It's perfect." That afternoon, the new bus rolled down the same streets that had once echoed with Jamie's uneven footsteps. Inside, sunlight poured through the windows, catching the small plaque above the driver's seat, in memory of Sarah Mitchell, who believed every child deserves the journey. As the engine hummed, Jamie turned to his father. "You know," he said, "Mr. Harris always said buses don't just take you places. They bring people together." Richard smiled faintly. He was right. But as the bus turned the corner, something in Tom's rearview mirror caught his eye. A black sedan parked at the end of the street, its windows tinted too dark to see through. He frowned, watching as it idled for a moment, and then slowly drove away. He couldn't explain it, but a chill crept up his spine. Somewhere far away, in a glass office overlooking the city, a man in a gray suit closed a file marked Project Maple. His lips curved into a knowing smile. "This is only the beginning," he whispered. And for Jamie, for Tom, and for Richard, the real story had only just begun. The hum of the engine faded into the distance, leaving only the quiet sigh of the wind rustling through the trees on Maple Drive. The golden bus shimmered in the afternoon sun, parked in front of the same small brick house where it all began. Inside, Jamie sat by the window, tracing invisible patterns on the glass as the last of the neighborhood kids waved goodbye. Life had started to find a rhythm again, or at least something that resembled it. Each morning, the bus rolled down the streets with Tom at the wheel, greeting new faces, new stories, new laughter. Jamie rode along sometimes, clipboard in hand, helping design routes and accessibility layouts. Richard had turned the project into something bigger, the Journey Foundation, an initiative to build accessible transportation across the state. But even with the glow of progress, something in the air felt unsettled. It began subtly. Anonymous donations to the foundation. Large ones, untraceable. Emails sent to Richard's office with strange precision, containing detailed plans for expansion that no one on his team had drafted. And that sedan, the one Tom had seen idling near the curb, it appeared again, parked outside the depot late at night. Always watching. Tom mentioned it once to Richard. Probably just a nosy neighbor, Richard said with a forced chuckle, though his jaw tightened. Still, he had started to notice things too. A delay in one of their bank transfers, files missing from the foundation server, a man at a conference who had known too much about his son, his ex-wife, his life. And then, one morning, a letter arrived. It wasn't sent to Richard's office or to the foundation. It came directly to Jamie, folded neatly inside an envelope with no return address. The boy opened it at breakfast. His hands trembled as he read. "Dad," he whispered. "You should see this." Richard took the letter. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. "Jamie, your mother's work wasn't finished. She believed in something bigger. Look in the blue box." Richard froze. He remembered the note Sarah had left the night she died, the one that mentioned Jamie's medication. The blue box. He had dismissed it as a practical detail, just part of Sarah's careful parenting, but now it meant something else. They went into Jamie's room where his mother's belongings had been carefully stored in a cedar chest. Inside was the blue plastic medicine box. Beneath the bottles and prescriptions there was a thin compartment. Hidden underneath it, a flash drive. Richard stared at it for a long moment before connecting it to his laptop. The screen lit up with a single folder. Project Maple, he clicked. Dozens of documents appeared. Blueprints, contracts, research notes, emails. His breath caught as he read the headers. It wasn't about transportation. It was medical. Experimental neurotechnology. Prosthetic interfaces. Neural enhancement. Mobility restoration. Work years ahead of anything on the market. Sarah's name was listed on nearly every file. But another name appeared beside it. Aldertech Industries. Richard's blood ran cold. Aldertech was his biggest rival, a company known for aggressive takeovers and ethically gray research. He had fought them for years, but here in these files their logo sat beside his late wife's signature. He leaned back, silent. "Dad?" Jamie asked softly. "What is it?" Richard forced a smile. "Just something Mom was working on." But that night, after Jamie had fallen asleep, he couldn't resist digging deeper. Sarah's research wasn't about creating bionic limbs or medical miracles. It was about connectivity, using neural pathways to interface directly with mobility systems. Her vision wasn't just to help one child walk. It was to build an ecosystem where no disability could isolate anyone again. And somehow, Aldertech had known. The next day, Richard drove to the Foundation's headquarters, a glass building that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. He called in his head of security. "I want everything checked," he said. "Emails, servers, employee contracts. Someone's been inside our system." But even as he spoke, he knew the infiltration had started long before the Foundation existed. That night, Tom was locking up the depot when he noticed something strange. One of the buses, not the new ones, but an older model in the corner, had its lights on. He walked over, thinking maybe a mechanic had left them running. But when he opened the door, he froze. The interior had been gutted. Wires hung from the ceiling like veins. Small devices blinked beneath the seats. Recording modules. Tracking sensors. Someone had been using this bus to spy on them. Tom backed out slowly and called Richard immediately. Within an hour, they were standing together in the dim light of the depot, staring at the hacked-out bus. "Who would do this?" Tom muttered. Richard didn't answer. He was looking at a small logo burned into the corner of one of the devices. A stylized letter, A. Aldertech. The next morning, a black envelope arrived on Richard's desk. No return address, no markings. Just one sentence typed neatly inside. "Stop Project Maple, or your son's journey ends where it began." For a moment, the world went silent. He rushed home, heart pounding, only to find Jamie safe sitting on the porch with Tom, sketching designs for the next bus model. But the sight brought little relief, because now he understood. Someone was trying to erase Sarah's dream, and they were willing to hurt a child to do it. Over the next few days, Richard's paranoia grew. Security doubled. Routes changed. But Jamie noticed the shift. "Dad," he said one night, "you're different. You keep looking over your shoulder." Richard forced a smile. "Just being careful, that's all." Jamie stared at him for a long moment. Mom used to say being careful isn't the same as being brave. The words landed heavier than they should have. That evening, Richard sat alone in his study, staring at a photograph of Sarah holding Jamie as a baby. Behind them was the same maple tree that still stood outside their old house, the one whose leaves had started turning gold again. He made a decision. The next day, he called a press conference. Cameras lined the hall as Richard stepped to the podium, Jamie beside him. "My wife dreamed of a world where disability doesn't define destiny," he said, his voice steady. "The Journey Foundation was built on that dream. And today, we're taking it further. We're launching Project Maple, a nationwide program to bring accessibility and innovation to every community in this country." Tom watched from the crowd, pride swelling in his chest. But even as the applause filled the room, a figure in the back stood motionless, expression unreadable. Hours later, when the lights had dimmed and the guests had gone, Richard returned to his car. Inside on the dashboard was a small flash drive, identical to the one Sarah had left. A note was taped to it. "You've made your choice. Now we make ours." That night, as the city slept, the foundation server crashed. Files vanished. Prototypes destroyed. A small explosion tore through the old bus depot, setting one of the older buses ablaze. No one was hurt, but it was a warning. Tom found a single word spray-painted on the depot wall. "Stop." He stood there, smoke curling into the dawn, clutching his cap tightly. When Richard arrived, the look in his eyes wasn't fear anymore, and it was fury. "They think they can scare us," Richard said quietly. "They don't understand who this is for." Over the next week, they moved operations underground, literally. An abandoned factory outside of town became their new base. Engineers, volunteers, parents, all rallied behind the mission. And in the center of it all sat Jamie, drawing designs, testing prototypes, asking questions that grown men struggled to answer. But one night, as rain hammered against the windows, Jamie overheard a conversation between Tom and Richard. "They won't stop," Tom said. "Whoever these people are, they know too much. You should take him somewhere safe." "I can't," Richard replied. "He's the reason I'm doing this." Jamie turned away before they saw him. The next morning, he was gone. The golden bus was missing from the lot. On his desk, he left a note. "If they're after me, I'll go to them. Maybe then they'll leave you alone." Panic erupted. Richard and Tom tore through the city, calling every contact, every route, every possible location. Hours passed. The rain thickened into a storm. Finally, as dawn broke, they spotted the bus, parked at the old house on Maple Drive. Richard ran inside, heart pounding. "Jamie!" The boy sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. His face was calm. "I just wanted to come home," he said softly. Before Richard could respond, headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan pulled up behind the bus. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall, composed, umbrella in hand. He smiled faintly. "Mr. Mitchell, I believe we have unfinished business." Richard's breath caught. He recognized him instantly. Alexander Kane, CEO of Aldertech. "You're trespassing," Richard said coldly. "I'm saving you," Kane replied. "You think you're building a charity? You're reviving a weapon. What are you talking about?" "Your wife's research wasn't just about helping the disabled walk," Kane said, his tone calm but sharp. "It was about linking human consciousness to machine systems. Neural synchronization. The military wanted it. We funded it. Until she disappeared." Richard's stomach turned. "You're lying," Kane smirked. "Am I?" Jamie looked between them, confused. "Mom wouldn't..." But before he could finish, the bus's dashboard flickered. The systems, his mother's code, had activated. The lights dimmed, replaced by a soft blue glow. A familiar voice, digitized but tender, filled the air. "Jamie, if you're hearing this, it means they found you." Richard froze. Sarah's voice. "Don't trust Aldertech. They twisted my research. But I left you too." The bus stopped moving. Steam hissed from beneath the hood as rain poured through the shattered windshield. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and burning rubber. For a long moment no one moved. Then through the haze, Richard heard a sound and faint, mechanical, almost rhythmic, like the soft hum of a heartbeat buried in static. Jamie was conscious, eyes wide staring at the dashboard where faint blue light still flickered. "Dad," he whispered. "It's still alive." Outside, the sedan lay crumpled against the curb, smoke curling upward like a warning signal to the night. Kane was gone. The driver's door hung open, the rain washing away footprints almost as soon as they were made. Tom stumbled toward the wreck, his flashlight cutting through the storm. "He's not here," he called. "No blood, nothing." Richard looked at him, soaked and trembling. "He walked away from that?" Tom didn't answer. He was staring past the wreckage at something glinting on the wet asphalt, a silver pendant shaped like the letter A. Richard picked it up. It was warm to the touch. On the back, engraved in tiny letters, were the words, "We continue her work." That night, after police sirens faded and the scene was cleared, Richard sat beside Jamie's hospital bed. The boy was unharmed, just shaken, but he kept glancing toward the window as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. "Dad," he said softly. "Mom's message. What did she mean by the map in the journey?" Richard hesitated. He had been asking himself the same question. Before he could answer, a soft knock echoed at the door. A woman stepped in, early 40s, soaked to the bone, wearing a raincoat that had seen too many storms. She introduced herself as Dr. Evelyn Rowe. "I worked with Sarah," she said quietly, before she left Aldertech. Richard's guard went up instantly. "You're with them." "I was," Evelyn said, "until I saw what they were really building." She glanced at Jamie. "Your wife didn't just create a mobility interface. She created a consciousness bridge, a way for neural patterns to transfer between organic and digital systems. It was supposed to help paralyzed patients control machines with thought. But Kane wanted more." Richard leaned forward. "More?" Evelyn nodded. "Replication. Human minds mapped into data. Digital immortality, hidden behind a humanitarian project." Jamie stared at her, horrified. "You mean, like copying people?" "Not copies," she said softly. "Continuations." Richard felt his stomach twist. "That's insane." Evelyn's gaze flicked toward him, sharp and knowing. "Then how do you explain her voice on the bus?" The room went silent. The rain outside softened to a steady whisper. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped rhythmically. Calm, mechanical, eternal. Evelyn opened a small case and handed Richard a microchip. "This was found in Sarah's lab after she disappeared. It's part of her original prototype, a neural seed. I think she embedded fragments of her cognition inside the bus system." "That's what you heard." Jamie's eyes widened. "Mom's in the bus?" "Not her body," Evelyn said, "but maybe her thoughts, her patterns, a part of her that refused to die." Richard stared at the small chip, his reflection distorted in its metallic surface. For a fleeting moment, hope and fear collided inside him. The next evening, they returned to the depot. The bus was still there, cordoned off by yellow tape and guarded by local police. But Richard had called in favors, quiet ones, and by midnight the vehicle was theirs again. Inside, the air felt different. The faint scent of ozone lingered, and the dashboard still pulsed with soft light, rhythmic like breathing. Jamie wheeled himself to the front, placing his hand on the control panel. "Mom?" he whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint voice crackled through the speakers. Distorted, fragmented, but unmistakably hers. "You found it." Richard's knees weakened. "Sarah." The light shimmered in patterns as if responding to her name. "They'll come for it, Richard. Don't let them. What we built wasn't meant to control people. It was meant to free them. Free them how?" he asked. Static swallowed the answer. The light dimmed again. Tom exhaled shakily. "Whatever this is, we're in deep, son." Richard ran a hand through his soaked hair. "She hid something, somewhere in the code. They extracted the bus's data core that night, setting up a small lab in the abandoned factory. The hum of servers filled the space, punctuated by the flicker of monitors displaying strings of encrypted sequences. Evelyn worked quietly, decoding fragments until something unexpected appeared. A map, not a digital one, a literal map. Coordinates forming a trail that began at Maple Drive and wound through small towns, forests, forgotten highways. ending at a place labeled simply Station 47. "What is it?" Jamie asked. Evelyn hesitated. "The original test site. The first trial of Sarah's neural bridge." Richard looked at her. "You were there?" She nodded slowly. "I was supposed to oversee it, but she canceled the project before it went live. Said it wasn't ready." Tom frowned. "If she canceled it, then who—" Before he could finish, the lights flickered. The screens went black. Then a message appeared, one word flashing in the darkness. "Hello." Evelyn's breath caught. "That's—" her handwriting. The server's word louder, as if alive. The word shifted, changing shape, letters rearranging until it read, "Come find me." Jamie's voice trembled. "It's her. She wants us to go." Richard stared at the glowing text, his mind racing. "Or someone wants us to think that." But even as he said it, something inside him, that fragile thread of belief he thought had died with Sarah, began to stir again. They left before dawn. The golden bus, patched and running on backup systems, rumbled to life once more. The road stretched ahead in long ribbons of mist and memory. For hours they drove in silence, the rhythmic swaying of the bus syncing with the beating of their hearts. Trees blurred past, and the world felt suspended, between life and death, memory and machine. As twilight deepened, the coordinates led them to a forgotten industrial complex swallowed by ivy and silence. Rusted gates stood half open, creaking softly in the wind. Faded signs marked it as an old government research facility, decommissioned years ago. Station 47. The bus rolled to a stop. The air was thick, heavy, almost electric. Richard stepped out first, flashlight cutting across broken glass and moss-covered concrete. Evelyn followed, holding a scanner that pulsed faintly as it picked up faint energy signatures. Jamie stayed by the door, watching them disappear into the dark. The world outside the bus felt colder now, as if the building itself was breathing, waiting. Inside, corridors stretched endlessly, each door sealed and numbered. Richard's beam landed on one marked Prototype Lab A, Neural Bridge Division. The handle was rusted, but when he touched it, the door clicked open easily, too easily. Inside, the walls were lined with dormant machinery. In the center of the room stood a glass pod faintly glowing from within. Evelyn's breath hitched. This can't be." Inside the pod, suspended in a web of wires and light, was a human silhouette, fragile, motionless, but unmistakably real. A woman. The glass reflected Richard's stunned face as he stepped closer. For a moment, the light inside flickered, revealing a pale face beneath, serene, lifelike. Sarah. He staggered back. No, that's impossible." Evelyn's scanner beeped wildly. Her neural activity, it's active. Faint but active. Tom muttered a prayer under his breath. Jamie wheeled forward, voice trembling. "Mom?" The figure inside the pod didn't move, but the lights in the room shifted, flickering in a slow, deliberate rhythm, forming letters across the walls. Not her. Richard froze. "What?" The lights pulsed again, rearranging. A copy. She saved the original. Evelyn stared at the pod in disbelief. "Then where's the real Sarah?" A deep rumble echoed through the facility, far away at first, then closer. Machinery waking from years of sleep. Jamie's voice was barely a whisper. "She's still out there." The light surged once more, blinding white, and a final message seared across the glass. "Find the real me before they do." Then everything went dark. The darkness swallowed them whole. For several seconds no one moved. The air was thick with the metallic scent of dust and ozone, and the faint crackle of static echoed through the corridor like a whisper trapped in the walls. Richard's flashlight flickered back to life, its thin beam slicing through the shadows. The glass pod was still there, empty now. The silhouette that had been inside was gone. "Where is she?" Jamie's voice trembled, more fear than curiosity. Evelyn scanned the room again, her device clicking rapidly, the readings spiking and falling like a heartbeat losing rhythm. "There's a surge in the east wing," she said quickly. "Something's moving." Tom looked toward the door. "We should go. Whatever this place is, it ain't safe anymore." But Richard couldn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the pod, on the faint outline of a handprint pressed against the inside of the glass, smaller, delicate but recent. He felt his pulse hammer against his chest. She was here, he whispered. Not a machine, not a memory. Her. They followed the corridor into the east wing, their footsteps echoing in the hollow silence. The walls were lined with obsolete equipment, screens coated in grime, wires dangling like roots from a dying tree. Every now and then the lights would flicker, revealing glimpses of faded photographs taped to the walls. Sarah and a small research team, all wearing the same badge. The emblem read Aldertech Division 0. Evelyn stopped at one photo, her face tightening. I remember this day, she said. It was the first neural sync test. Sarah had doubts, but Kane pushed her. He said the government funding depended on results. Richard stared at the photo. What happened? Evelyn hesitated. The subject, a volunteer, vanished mid-procedure. We thought it was a system failure. But Sarah said she saw movement in the digital interface, like consciousness didn't disappear. It crossed over. Jamie's voice was small. Crossed over to where? Before anyone could answer, the hallway lights flared, all at once blinding white. The building trembled. Down the hall, a door burst open and a rush of cold air swept through, carrying with it a faint, unmistakable sound. A woman's voice. Soft, fragmented, like a radio signal cutting through static. Richard. It was Sarah's voice. He froze. Sarah? The voice came again, distorted but clear. You're close. Too close. They're coming. Who? He shouted. No reply. Only the low mechanical groan of something powering up beneath the floor. Evelyn's scanner spiked red. Movement, multiple heat signatures. A metallic hiss filled the corridor. The walls began to shift, panels sliding open to reveal small drones, their red sensors glowing like eyes in the dark. They hovered silently for a moment and then advanced. Tom swung his flashlight at one. Move. The group bolted, Jamie clutching his tablet, his wheels rattling against the cracked concrete. The drones followed, beams of light sweeping across the walls like predator eyes. Evelyn ducked into a side corridor, pulling open a steel door that led to an underground stairwell. Down there, she shouted. They stumbled into the darkness below, the door slamming shut behind them just as a burst of energy scorched the frame. The stairwell descended endlessly, the air growing colder, denser. At the bottom was a large metal door marked with a faded number, 47B. Richard pushed it open. Inside was a massive chamber, filled with humming servers and glass tanks. Blue light pulsed through cables like veins, and in the center, a circular console with an interface that flickered to life as they approached. Jamie wheeled closer, eyes wide. It's her system, he said. Mom's interface, Evelyn nodded slowly. This must be where she uploaded the original code. Richard stared at the glowing console. On the screen, a single line of text blinked. Insert neural key to continue. He turned to Evelyn. What does that mean? She swallowed. The chip. The one she left you. Richard hesitated, then pulled the microchip from his pocket, the same one Sarah had hidden inside the blue box. His hands shook as he placed it into the slot. The lights dimmed. Then a soft hum filled the chamber as the system came alive. On the screen, the flickering image of Sarah appeared. Not flesh, not ghost, but something in between. Her eyes were calm. Richard, she said, if you're seeing this, it means I've failed. Era. His voice cracked. I tried to destroy it, she continued, but Aldertech rebuilt it. They called it immortality. I called it the end of choice. Evelyn's voice trembled. End of choice? Sarah's image turned toward her. When a mind can be copied, control becomes ownership. Kane wanted to use the neural bridge to create obedience, to rewrite human will itself. Jamie's voice broke through. Mom, where are you? Are you alive? The hologram flickered. Not here, not yet. But there's still a way. Before she could finish, the screens glitched violently. Her image warped, distorted into a swirl of light and static. The system's hum deepened into a low mechanical growl. Evelyn's scanner screamed. Someone's overriding the signal. She shouted. They found us! The hologram shifted, Sarah's face dissolving, replaced by another. Kane. His voice filled the chamber, smooth and cold. You never understood, Mitchell. Evolution doesn't wait for permission. Richard's fists clenched. What did you do to her? Kane smiled faintly. She's where she always wanted to be. In the code, eternal. And soon your son will join her. Over my dead body, Richard hissed. Easily arranged, Kane replied. The power surged. The server screamed, lights flashing erratically. One of the glass tanks burst, releasing a torrent of fluid across the floor. From the broken machinery, mechanical limbs unfolded, humanoid forms blank-faced and gleaming. Tom grabbed a wrench from a nearby crate. "You've got to be kidding me." The figures advanced, movement slow but deliberate, their metallic feet echoing like war drums. Richard pulled Jamie behind him. "We end this now." Evelyn was typing frantically into the console. "If I can isolate her original code, I can shut the override down, but I need time." "Do it." Richard shouted. The air filled with the sound of metal colliding. Tom swinging the wrench, sparks flying. One machine crashed to the ground, but another lunged forward, grabbing Richard by the arm. He twisted free, slamming a console panel into its chest, sending it crashing into a column. Evelyn's fingers blurred across the keys. Almost there. On the main screen, Sarah's face flickered back through the static, her voice layered over Kane's. "Richard, the code. It's not just data. It's me. You can't destroy it without destroying what's left of me." Richard froze. "Sarah, no, you have to choose," she said softly. "End it or let them use me." The machines kept advancing. Evelyn shouted, "Now, Richard!" "The failsafe." He looked at the control, a single red switch glowing beneath the console glass. His hand hovered above it. Jamie's voice cracked through the chaos. "Dad, she said there's still a way." But Sarah's image flickered again, her voice trembling, fading. "Don't let them turn me into their weapon." Kane's voice overlapped hers, cruel and calm. "If you shut it down, you'll kill her. If you don't, we win. Either way, you lose." The chamber trembled. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Richard's hand hovered, torn between love and survival. Between the woman he lost and the world she tried to save. Then Jamie rolled forward, grabbed his father's wrist and whispered, "What if she's not asking us to end it? What if she's asking us to free her?" Richard's breath caught. For the first time, the choice became something else. Not loss, not surrender, but faith. He looked at Evelyn. "Can we transfer her code?" Evelyn hesitated. "To what?" Jamie's eyes flicked toward the bus, visible through the glass window above. Still humming faintly, its systems active, waiting. "To her ride." The realization hit them all at once. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "The journey." And in that instant, the lights surged once more, the entire facility vibrating with life, as if it had just woken up and heard her name. The walls of the chamber pulsed like a heartbeat, blue light spilling across Richard's face as if the room itself was breathing with her memory. Cables throbbed with energy, the hum of servers deepening to a low, resonant drone that seemed to come from beneath the earth. Evelyn's fingers danced across the console, eyes darting between streams of code that raced like lightning through glass veins. Jamie's voice cut through the chaos, certain, steady, impossibly calm for his age. "We move her into the bus." That's what she built it for. Richard's eyes flicked toward the observation window. Through the haze of smoke and flickering light, the old bus sat like a relic of another life. Blue paint chipped, engine humming faintly, as if responding to something unseen. The bus that had once carried laughter, school trips, and simple days. The same bus Sarah had rebuilt piece by piece before she vanished. Evelyn's voice trembled. "If we reroute the consciousness stream, we could dislodge her from Kane's control node. But there's no backup. If the power spikes, she's gone." Richard finished for her. Jamie met his father's gaze. "Or she's finally free." Richard's pulse pounded. Every screen now flickered with fragments of Sarah's face, scattered between layers of code. Her eyes, her smile, her voice calling his name through digital static. "Do it," he said. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She slammed the override and the console erupted in motion, torrents of data spilling upward, strings of light twisting like DNA. The chamber darkened as power drained toward the bus. A shockwave rippled through the floor, making the metal groan. From above, Kane's voice roared through the speakers. "You think you can steal her from me? You think she belongs to you?" Richard shouted over the noise. "She doesn't belong to anyone." A deep rumble shook the walls. Ceiling panels fell. Sparks rained down like fireflies dying in midair. Evelyn's hands blurred as she redirected the transfer. "She's fighting him," she said, voice breaking. "Her code's resisting. She's pushing him out." Jamie's wheelchair shook as he watched lines of code morph into light across the glass. "Come on, Mom," he whispered. Come back to us, and then for an instant the room went silent. No hum. No alarms, just stillness. Then the light outside changed. The bus's headlights flared to life, brighter than they'd ever been. Its engine roared, not mechanical but alive, deep and resonant like a heartbeat through steel. Evelyn looked up, eyes wide. She's in. Richard turned toward the bus, his breath catching. Sarah? Through the cracked glass of the observation window, the cabin light flickered. And for a fleeting moment he saw her. Not a hologram, not a memory. Her reflection shimmered across the windshield. Face soft, peaceful, eyes meeting his as if time had folded in on itself. But Kane's voice cut through again, furious, distorted. You can't trap eternity in a machine. You'll destroy everything. The chamber lights blazed red. Evelyn's monitor screamed with warnings. He's rerouting the feedback loop when he's going to blow the core. Richard ran to the console. How long do we have? 2 minutes, she shouted. Maybe less. Jamie wheeled himself toward the door. Then we drive her out. Evelyn turned sharply. Drive? That bus isn't... She's awake, Jamie said quietly, and she knows the way. The boy was already moving, rolling toward the stairwell that led up to the bay. Richard followed without hesitation, the sound of the core's rising pitch echoing behind them like a scream trapped in metal. Evelyn grabbed her pack, sprinting after them. They burst into the upper chamber where the bus waited, blue paint reflecting the strobing red light of the alarm. Smoke hung in the air, glowing in the headlights. Richard yanked open the bus doors. Sarah, he shouted. The dashboard lights flickered in response. A soft female voice, ran hers gentle but steady, filled the cabin. Engine ready, Jamie smiled through tears. She's talking. Evelyn climbed aboard, strapping herself in. The facility's collapsing. If she's linked to the grid, she's not staying here, Richard said. We're getting her out. He slammed the door shut, gripped the worn leather wheel. Hang on. The bus shuddered as it came alive, lights pulsing along its frame. The rearview mirror vibrated, showing a reflection that wasn't the chamber but something vast and blue. A digital landscape, shifting and infinite. Evelyn's breath caught. She's bridging both worlds. The floor beneath them cracked, molten light seeping through. Kane's voice bellowed through the speakers. You're tearing the fabric between systems. Stop it, Richard's knuckles whitened. She's not your system anymore. He pressed the accelerator. The bus lurched forward, tires screeching against the metal ramp. The front wall split open like a mouth, revealing the night outside, lightning slashing across a storm-choked sky. As the bus roared into the open air, the entire complex began to implode behind them, collapsing in waves of fire and light. Shards of glass and steel shot through the air like rain. Evelyn held onto the rail, shouting over the chaos. She's redirecting the collapse. Richard glanced at the rearview mirror. Through the storm of destruction, he saw the light from the facility spiraling upward, not dispersing, but forming a pattern, like wings unfolding. Jamie turned to the dashboard, eyes wide. She's stabilizing herself. Then from the speakers, Sarah's voice came again, softer now, threaded with calm. Keep going, Richard. Don't stop. The data stream needs distance. He drove faster. The highway ahead blurred into streaks of light and rain. Each lightning strike lit her reflection in the glass like she was sitting beside him again, hair pulled back, eyes full of quiet determination. Richard's chest ached. I never stopped looking for you. I know, her voice replied. But you were never meant to find me. You were meant to finish what I started. Jamie leaned forward. Mom, are you still you? There was a pause. Then softly, I'm everything I ever was, and everything I chose to leave behind. The storm thickened. Static danced along the bus's edges, crackling like lightning contained in metal. Evelyn's monitor beeped rapidly. Kane's trying to reestablish connection. He's pulling her back. Sarah's voice hardened. Not this time. The windshield flared white as the road ahead fractured, reality bending, pixelating as if the world itself was caught between collapse and rebirth. Brace yourselves, Richard yelled. The bus surged forward, light exploding around them. For a split second, there was no sound, no wind, no gravity, only silence and white light. Then, just as suddenly, the light receded. The bus rolled to a stop on a desolate stretch of desert highway. The storm was gone. The stars above burned brighter than they ever had, the horizon stretching endlessly. Evelyn gasped, looking at her scanner. We're offline. There's no signal. No data grid, nothing. Jamie looked around. Where are we? Richard stepped out of the bus. The ground was dry, cracked, shimmering faintly. But in the distance, something glowed. Faint blue motes, swirling gently in the air like fireflies. Mom? He whispered. The radio crackled softly. Sarah's voice came through, faint but peaceful. You made it. Where are you? Everywhere you are. The system's gone. The code's free. No one controls it now. Evelyn's voice trembled. She's diffused. Her consciousness spread across the network. Jamie placed a hand on the dashboard. So she's alive? The bus engine purred softly in response. A light blinked twice on the console, almost like a heartbeat. Richard looked at the sky, tears catching the starlight. She did it. But then the ground beneath them trembled faintly, and not from collapse, but something waking. Evelyn's scanner lit up again. There's residual energy, she said. It's not over. The bus lights flickered once more, the radio hissing with static. Then a new voice, Kane's distant, fractured, broke through. You think you won, but you opened the bridge. You freed her, and everything with her. The signal cut out. A cold wind swept the highway. The blue motes in the distance began to drift closer, swirling faster, almost purposeful. Richard stood still, staring at the horizon, the glow reflecting in his eyes. Sarah, he whispered, what did you set free? The radio was silent for a long moment. Then softly, and almost like a sigh, came her voice again. The future. And in the distance, where the desert met the dark, a new light began to rise. Too bright to be dawn, too strange to be human. The light on the horizon swelled until it was no longer a shape, but a feeling. Soft, radiant, almost like warmth made visible. The blue motes swirled around the bus, dancing in the air with the grace of falling snow, yet each shimmer carried something deeper. Memory, presence, echoes of her laughter. Richard stood beside the bus door, his reflection ghosted in the metal, eyes fixed on the horizon that was neither night nor day. The storm was gone. The desert had gone quiet. All that remained was the hum of the engine, steady as a pulse, hers, still somehow alive within the steel and circuits. Evelyn stepped down beside him, wind tugging gently at her hair. The readings are off every scale, she murmured. It's like the atmosphere's rewriting itself. Energy, data, light, all fused together. She paused, lowering her scanner. But it feels peaceful. Jamie wheeled forward onto the cracked ground, his eyes wide, reflecting the glow of the drifting lights. She's here, isn't she? Richard nodded slowly. Yeah, she never really left. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of voices, thousands of them, layered and distant, like a chorus made of every whisper that ever mattered. The blue motes began to rise higher, forming a faint spiral that twisted toward the glowing horizon. Richard watched them go, a mix of awe and ache deep in his chest. She said she freed the future, he murmured. I thought she meant us. Evelyn shook her head. She meant everyone. Jamie tilted his head, eyes following the spiral of light. What happens now? The question lingered unanswered. The hum grew softer, almost melodic, as if the desert itself was breathing again. Richard looked at the bus, its paint glowing faintly under the alien light, its shape somehow gentler now. He remembered the first time Sarah brought it home, smiling like she'd found something worth saving. She'd said it was more than metal and wheels. It was a vessel for stories, a place where strangers met, where silence gave way to laughter. He understood it now. She hadn't just built a machine. She'd built a bridge. He placed a hand on the bus's hood, feeling the faint vibration beneath his palm. You did it, Sarah, he whispered. You kept the world human. Evelyn glanced at him. We should leave before the energy field destabilizes. But Richard shook his head. No, we stay. Just for a moment. They stood together, watching as the light on the horizon grew brighter. Not consuming, not violent. Just a slow, blooming radiance, like dawn remembering how to rise. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, every grain of sand glowing faintly blue. Jamie looked at the horizon, then at his father. Do you think she's still watching us? Richard smiled softly. She's not watching. She's part of it all now. Evelyn closed her eyes, letting the hum settle around her like a lullaby. She changed what it means to be gone. For a while, none of them spoke. The bus engine quieted, its lights dimming to a soft pulse. Jamie leaned his head back and closed his eyes, breathing in the stillness. The air tasted of ozone and dust and something else, like the beginning of rain that never quite fell. When Richard finally turned to Evelyn, his voice was low. "What happens when something human touches something infinite?" She looked at him, her expression soft but unreadable. "Maybe it reminds the infinite what it means to care." He nodded slowly. "Or maybe it reminds us that even the smallest love can echo forever." A sudden shift in the air made them all look up. The spiral of light had begun to break apart, scattering into 1,000 smaller threads that drifted outward across the desert, carried by unseen winds. Each one flickered with a heartbeat's rhythm before vanishing into the distance. Evelyn raised her scanner instinctively, then lowered it again, realizing there was no data to capture. No number could measure what they were witnessing. Jamie smiled faintly. "She's everywhere now." Richard turned toward him, his heart tightening with something bittersweet. "She always wanted you to see the world as more than it looked like." "I think I do now," Jamie whispered. "Everything's connected, even when we can't see it." The bus door creaked softly as Richard climbed aboard once more. He sat in the driver's seat, his fingers brushing the worn steering wheel, remembering every morning Sarah had sat there, hair undone, humming softly as she waited for the kids to climb on. Back then, life had felt small, a routine, a rhythm, the quiet beauty of ordinary days. But now he understood. It had never been small. It had been infinite in its own way. The dashboard screen flickered and a faint pulse of light formed. Not an image this time, but a single word written across the display. "Thank you," Richard's breath caught. His hand trembled against the wheel. He whispered back, "No, Sarah. Thank you." Outside, the desert wind carried a low, distant sound. Not mechanical, not natural. A song. The same melody Sarah used to hum while soldering circuits late into the night. The same tune she'd played for Jamie when he was scared. It drifted across the sand like a memory finding its way home. Evelyn leaned against the bus, watching the lights fade higher into the atmosphere. "Do you think anyone will ever believe this?" Richard looked at the horizon. "They don't need to. It wasn't meant to be believed. It was meant to be felt," Jamie grinned. Then it worked. The boy's eyes reflected the last fragments of blue light dissolving into dawn. His voice was soft, almost reverent. "You know what's funny? We spent all this time trying to bring her back, but maybe she was trying to show us how to move forward." Richard turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Jamie looked at the open sky. "Maybe letting go isn't about losing someone. Maybe it's about giving them space to become something bigger than we can hold." The words hung in the still air, weightless yet eternal. Richard nodded, unable to speak. Evelyn wiped at her eyes, though she smiled when she did it. Above them, the horizon shimmered one last time. The blue light folded inward, condensing into a single streak that rose silently toward the stars, like a soul ascending, or perhaps simply returning to where it began. And for a moment, Richard swore he heard her voice one last time, carried gently by the wind. "Keep driving." He smiled through the ache in his chest. "Always." The sun began to rise, washing the desert in golden warmth. The bus gleamed in the light, its reflection dancing over the sand like water. Birds appeared in the distance, silhouettes cutting across the sky. The storm was gone. The world felt new. Evelyn took one last look at the horizon. "So what now?" Richard started the engine, the familiar hum filling the air. "Now we go where the road takes us." Jamie laughed softly. "That's what Mom always said." Richard smiled, eyes on the glowing line of dawn ahead. "Then we'd better not keep her waiting." The bus rolled forward, tires crunching gently against the dry earth. Behind them, the desert shimmered faintly blue one last time before fading into the warmth of morning. The world seemed to exhale, as if everything that had been held too tightly had finally been released. As they drove, the wind caught Sarah's melody again, faint but unmistakable, threading through the sound of the engine and the whisper of the sand. It lingered in the air like a secret that didn't need to be solved, only remembered. And somewhere, in the quiet space between sky and code, between memory and motion, a consciousness watched over them. Not bound by time or place, but carried forward in every heartbeat that dared to believe love could outlast form. Because maybe that was the truth Sarah had discovered. That the future wasn't something to control or conquer. It was something to be trusted. Something built moment by those who choose to remember what it means to feel. Richard glanced in the mirror, catching Jamie's reflection, calm, smiling, alive with wonder. For the first time in a long time, he felt no weight pressing down, only the gentle pull of the road ahead. The light grew brighter. The desert stretched endlessly forward. The horizon opened like a promise, and as the bus disappeared into the morning, the question that hung in the air was one that would echo long after the story ended. What if love, pure, patient, imperfect love, was humanity's last real technology? The wind offered no answer. But somewhere, beneath the hum of the engine and the endless sky, it felt like Sarah was still smiling.